Students of Amarjyoti Saraswati International School, a very good morning to all. Myself, Jijo Varghese. Today we are going to study Social Studies, chapter number 1. Dear students, congratulations, for now you all are in class 6 and you are going to unveil a lot of new learnings this year. In the past, in the last academic year, you had studied various subjects and you gained lots of information which increased your knowledge. Based on the learnings you had in your past is the learning you are going to learn in the future. Isn't the past and present related to each other? But do you know that there is a lot more to learn from the past? So let's learn it from our social science, social studies book of history, chapter number 1. Name of the chapter is Prehistory and History. Dear students, have you ever been to a museum or any old fort? Um, while visiting, did you wonder about the people who crafted those wonderful sculptures, painting, and pottery kept there? Or about the people who built and lived in those huge forts? If yes, like you, many people in the past also had the desire that led us to study history. For us, things which happened in the past is history, but actually that events can be classified into two, history and prehistory. Now, what is history? History is a written account of people, places, and events of the past. So that means that if you find anything that is in a written account, means if any of the information, either of the people, places, and events which happened in the past, if you find it in any written document, then it is considered as a history. Now, what does this history tells us? It tells us how and where people lived, what they did, and what were their customs and beliefs. It also tells us the various ways they traded, the wars they fought, and the rulers who governed them. Right? These are some of the informations which we come to know by studying history. Right? So remember, what is history? It is a written document. Okay? Anything which had happened in the past, and if you find it in a written account, then you can consider it as a history. Okay? If it is not a written account, then it will not be a history. Okay? So history is a written account of people, places, and events of the past. Right? This will be a fill in the blanks also, that history is a dash account of people or events of the past. So the answer will be written account of people, places, and events of the past. Right? So that was about the history. Now the second one is prehistory. Right? So prehistory is an account of events that happened or may have happened before people invented writing. So history is something which is a written account, which is the information about history is in written, right? But prehistory is something which had been before writing was invented. So we will not have any written documents of prehistory, right? So the difference between history and prehistory is that we will have a written account of everything. The written information available is of the history, and prehistory we won't have any written account, right? Now, history is divided into three main periods. The three main periods are ancient, medieval, and modern. This year we will study ancient period of history. Why do we study history? As earlier discussed the beginning, based on the learnings you had in your past is the learning you are going to learn in the future. That means that in the last academic year, when you were studying in class 5, you must have studied various subjects, right? And this year also the same subjects must be followed. But you will see a lot of changes in those subjects. It won't be the same as you have studied in the last class, right? So there will be a lot of changes. Same way, if you see the life about 200 years ago, and even more so of around 2000 years ago, will it be same? No, it will be different, right? So what do we come to know through this? That there has been changes, right? History studies these changes and the factors that caused these changes. Now, history, it also teaches us many other lessons. For instance, it tells us how some people revolted against a cruel king. It inspires us to fight against cruelty and injustice too. So many more learning can be done while studying history. Similarly, it also shows how during periods of peace, rich cultures developed and beautiful works of art were created. So studying history can help us learn lots of informations from the past, right? Now we know that what is the source of history? The source of history is written accounts or written documents. But what is the source of prehistory? That is what we are going to discuss in the next point. Dear students, you must be knowing that around 65 millions of years ago, dinosaurs came to an extinct, right? None of us have seen the dinosaurs, but how did we know that before human beings, these dinosaurs lived on this earth? Do you know? Yes. So these dinosaurs lived on the earth was studied by the archaeologist. Now, who is an archaeologist, right? So let's see on page number 2, the sources of prehistory. Prehistory deals with a very distinct past. There are no written records from this period. As we already said that there is no written records from the prehistory. The main sources of information of prehistory are archaeology and oral traditions. Archaeology. So the only sources of prehistory is on archaeology and oral traditions. Now, oral traditions means stories handed down from generations to generations by word of mouth, right? So you must have listened stories from your grandmother's mouth, right? So that is oral traditions. Now, what is archaeology? Archaeology means it is the study of ancient things. So ancient means the things of the past, right? So it is the study of the physical remains of the past. That is what archaeology means. So anything physical, right? Physical means those things which we can touch. Uh, the study of any such physical things of the past is known as archaeology. So what is the sources of prehistory? The sources of prehistory is archaeology and oral traditions. So now the one who studies this archaeology is known as archaeologist. Now ancient cities and villages are often buried under soil, water and volcanic ash. These places called archaeological sites are carefully excavated, means dug out by archaeologists, The archaeologists study the artifacts and fossils they find in these sites to understand the modern past better. So now what is the duty of this archaeologist? They go to these different places uh, about the information gathered. They must have gathered the information that these places may contain some of the ancient things. Okay, and then what do? They, which are the places, ancient cities and villages, which are often buried under a soil, water, or volcanic ash. Okay, so these places are called as archaeological sites. Now, this archaeologists, what they do, they carefully excavate, means dug, they dig it. Then they study the artifacts and fossils which they find in these sites to understand the ancient past better. Okay, so the things which they find by digging out, they study that to understand the ancient past better. Okay, so what are the things they find out here? Artifacts and fossils. That is what we are going to discuss now. Now the first one is artifacts. Now what is artifacts? So artifacts are the tools, weapons, pottery, toys, ornaments, and other things used in ancient times that has been uncovered at archaeological sites over the world. These are called artifacts. Now, when the archaeologists they uncover the archaeological sites, the things which they found out over there are known as artifacts. Okay, which are the things? It may be tools, weapons, pottery, toys, ornaments, and other things. Okay, which were used in the ancient times. So these all things which are found at the archaeological sites, these things are called artifacts. Okay, so artifacts meaning objects crafted by human. Remember this, artifacts means the objects which are crafted by humans, which are made by humans. So artifacts are the objects or things which are crafted or made by humans. Now archaeologists conduct scientific tests and they find out how old the artifacts are. The study and compare their shape, size, and pattern to understand how people lived in the past. Okay, so the archaeologist's work is not only to dig and find out the artifacts, okay, or fossils, but afterwards also they study it, right? They do some scientific test and they find out that how old these things are. They study and compare their shapes, size, and pattern, and through this they come to know how the people lived in the past. So here below you can see there is a picture. There is an artifact excavated in the different sites. So now you can see these artifacts are stored in a museum. Okay, when you visit a museum, you must also be seeing some of the artifacts. It may be a tool or weapons or pots or toys, ornaments, and such things, right? So these are excavated by some of the archaeologists at some archaeological sites over the world. Okay. Previously we saw that archaeologists they study artifacts and fossils. We already learned about artifacts, right? Now the next is fossils. Now what are fossils? uh, Sometimes when animals die, their bodies or parts of them get fixed in rocks or ice. This remains or the impressions of these dead bodies uh, are called fossils. So remains of the plants could also form fossils. So we can say that the remains of the animals means the dead bodies of the animals, okay, or their parts which gets fixed in rocks or ice, right? Uh, or even the remains of the plants, they form fossils. Okay. Now, this archaeologist use fossils and as an important evidence of life in the past. So, before, as I said, dinosaurs they came to an existence 65,000 million years ago. So, none of the archaeologists have found a living dinosaur. What they found? They found the fossils of the dinosaurs, uh, which they found out while excavating some archaeological sites. Okay, the same way, these archaeologists they use fossils as an important evidence of life in the past. So through the fossils they found out, they came to know that by doing some experiments or from doing some test on that, they must have found out that this dinosaurs would have been living on this earth before this many years, and this is their size and shape. That is how they must have found out by studying those fossils. Okay, so what is fossil? Fossil is the remains of dead animals, or it can be plants which is found or fixed in the rocks or ice. Okay. Now, fossils helps archaeologists understand which animals were tamed in prehistoric times and which were wild. This is how we know that the dogs were tamed almost 12,000 years ago. So now, by studying these fossils, the archaeologist can also understand uh, which animals are tamed. Okay, means the uh, domestic animals and which are wild. Okay, so before 12,000 years ago, dog was a tamed animal. This is what the archaeologists found out by studying the fossils. Now we will study about dating the discoveries. Now, once the archaeologists find out the fossils, then what happens next? Okay, so objects which are carefully dug out by archaeologists are first sent to the laboratory. We studied previously that the archaeologist visits the archaeological sites and they excavate, or means they dig the soil, and whatever fossil or artifacts they find out, they very carefully remove it, okay, without uh, um, giving it any damage. Then what they do, they send it to the laboratory. Then tests are carried out to find out how ancient they are. Okay, so first of all, they will carry a test and they will find out that how old this fossil or artifacts or the things which have been found out by the archaeologist and the archaeological sites, right? An important method used by archaeologists is known as carbon dating. So now to find out how old the thing is, and a different method is being used, which is known as carbon dating. So what is carbon dating? It is an important method used by the archaeologist to find out how ancient or how old the fossil or the things which they have found out is. Okay. Now, what is this carbon dating? In this method, the amount of carbon trapped in bones or potsherds, potsherds means the broken pieces of the pottery, is studied in order to understand how old the objects are. So, carbon dating, from the name itself, we can understand that what do they do in this method? They try to understand that how much amount of carbon is present in the bones or in the broken pieces of the pottery, right? Uh, this is studied in order to understand how old the thing is. Now we will study about the role of archaeologist, right? So before we studied that once the excavation is done, the fossil or artifacts are found out, they are sent for different kind of test, right? And the test is known as carbon dating. It is in order to find out how ancient the thing is. Now we will study the role of archaeologist, right? What is the role or the duty of an archaeologist? The archaeologists are considered to be the scientists of history. So archaeologists are those who can be called as the scientists of history. They study the skeletal remains of the living beings, artifacts, and fossils. So, what is the work of the archaeologist? To study the skeletal remains, okay, of living beings, artifacts, and fossils. They determine their dates and tell us about the different groups of people that lived in the past and about their lives. So once they find out any skeletal remains of living beings, artifacts, and fossils, they tell us how ancient or how old this thing is. Okay, and they also tell us that how these different groups of people lived in the past, right? So this is what the role of the archaeologist is. Now, oral sources. So we saw that prehistory has two sources, right? The one is oral sources and another one is archaeology. Now, oral sources means passing information from word, mouth to mouth, right? So oral tradition is a rich source of information for historians. So rich source of information. In India, the Vedas, we know that the Ramayana and Mahabharata are our Vedas, and the Puranas were handed down orally for hundreds of years. So these Vedas were transferred from one person to another orally. Okay, very lately it was in the written form, but at the beginning it was in the it was transferred from one person to another for hundreds of years orally, right? uh, so uh, then dance and music in India also have strong oral traditions with ragas and dance mudras being passed on almost unchanged from teacher guru to student. Oral sources tells us a lot about the times to which they belong. So we can see that dance and music, okay, the what to say, the rag and the mudras, also this all information from the teacher to the student, from the guru to the shishya, was being transferred orally, okay, till the written documents were invented. Before that, everything was transferred orally. An ancient, here you can see an ancient sage passing down wisdom to his students orally. You can see a sage, he's the teacher, okay? And you can see the shishyas, the students, they are sitting nearby, and what the ancient sage is doing, he is giving his wisdom, his knowledge to the students. How he is giving? He is giving orally, okay? Nothing is in the written form. So now next topic is sources of history. So from the beginning we have been saying that what is the source of history? The written accounts or the written documents, that is the source of history, right? Whereas archaeology and oral traditions are the sources of prehistory. So history, uh, the written documents are the sources of history. Now, which are these written documents that we are talking about? So the written documents are manuscripts, inscriptions, monuments, and coins are some examples of this written evidences. So the written documents include manuscript, inscription, monuments, and coins. Okay, so all different informations regarding history is either in manuscripts, inscriptions, monuments, or in coins. Okay, So one by one, we will go through all of this written evidences or documents of the which are the sources of history. Now, handwritten, first one, that is manuscript. Handwritten records are called manuscripts. Okay, what is a manuscript? Handwritten records. Manu means hand. Okay, so script, any script which is written by hand is known as manuscript. If you are writing through your hand, then it is considered as a manuscript. Now, before people learned to make paper, they wrote on dried palm leaves. Nowadays we write on the paper. Okay, but earlier there were no paper. So where they used to write? They used to write on dried palm leaves or write on the bark of the trees and parchment, that is the dried skin of sheep and goats, right? So this is where the manuscripts were written, right? So what is manuscript? Manuscript is a handwritten record where they used to write. They used to write on the dried palm leaves, the bark of trees, and the dried skin of sheep and goats, which is known as parchment. Now, these manuscripts were often written in languages that are not in common use now. So, this we are talking about the history. We are talking about past, right? So earlier, these manuscripts were written in the languages that are not commonly used now, such as classical Greek and Latin in Europe, and Pali and Sanskrit. So these are some of the languages which were used to write manuscript. Okay. So Pali and Sanskrit was used in India, Latin in Europe, okay, Greek and Latin in Europe. Now, manuscripts tells us about the reigns of different queens and kings, the experience of travelers, life in the courts, trade and commerce, the life of the common people, battles, religions, and the important events. So this all information is stored in manuscript. Okay, what are the different informations stored in manuscripts? Informations like the reigns of different queens and kings, the experiences of travelers, life in the courts, trade and commerce, the life of the common people, battles, religions, and the important events. These are some of the events or information that were written on manuscript. All written records of history may be classified as religious writing, secular writing, and accounts of travelers. Now, these written records of history are classified into three. Okay, first one is religious writing, next is secular writing, and third one is accounts of travelers. So one by one we will see the written records, which is religious, secular, and accounts of travelers. Now first one is religious. Let's see, many of the earliest writings dealt with religion. Okay, so earliest when people started to write, they started writing about religion. Okay, text like Puranas, the Tripitakas, and the Angas provide valuable information about the social structure, the political system, and the religious belief of the people of the time they were composed in. Now, so here in the religious writings, which were the earliest writings, there we can see the text like the Puranas and the Tripitakas and the Angas. They provide some information about the social structure, political system, and the religious belief. Now, what is social structure? Social structure included the information about how the human beings are supposed to live in the society. Okay. Even the discrimination of lower caste, middle class, upper class. This all can be also included in the social structure. Okay. Then the political system. Political system includes about the rules and regulations and who will govern, who will be the government, and such kind of things are included in political system, and the religious beliefs of the people. These are the three things which were the writings uh, of the earliest writings related to the religion. Then next is secular, which is just the opposite, or we can say the non-religious literature. Okay, so here they used to include stories, poems, and books on laws and on society, how the society has to live their life. There used to be some laws and rules. Okay, this all were included. The stories, poems. Okay, then the Earth Shastra of Kautilya. It tells us a lot about the administration and socio-economic conditions of India uh, during the time of Mauryas. So now this Arthashastra of Kautilya, which was written during the time of the Mauryan dynasty, it tells us about the social economic condition, the economic condition of India during the Mauryan dynasty. Now, next we can see a biography, a writing like the Harshcharita written by Banabhatta provide us with important information regarding the administrative structure and the social conditions of the people during this period. So again, we can see a biographical writings, means autobiography written by Banabhatta named as Harshcharita, which provides information regarding the administrative structure and social conditions of the people during this period. Now, next is accounts of travelers. Travelers means those who travel to India during various time, and they left some writings. So here you can see the books and accounts of travelers are of immense use to historians. Megasthenes, who visited India during Chandragupta's time, wrote Indica. So here Megasthenes, he wrote a book named as Indica during the reign of Chandragupta, that is the Mauryan dynasty. Right? Again, then we can see the account of Fan Hian, that is Faxan, and Huyen Sang, two Chinese travelers, also through lights of the reigns of Guptas and Harshvardhana, respectively. We will learn about them in the book. So here you can see that Megasthenes and two Chinese travelers, they visited India during the Mauryan dynasty and the Gupta dynasty, and they wrote, Megasthenes wrote a book, named it as Indica, right? And they throw the light on the reigns of Gupta dynasty and on the Mauryan dynasty. Right. Now the next topic is inscription. So unlike a manuscript, inscriptions are writings carved on hard surfaces like metal, stone, walls, rocks, and pillars. Okay, so inscriptions are something which are not written, they are carved. Okay, you can't write on hard surfaces like metal. So what you have to do, you have to carve it through hard metals, through metal, stone, walls, rocks, and pillars. Okay, so the stone edicts of Ashoka, whom we will read later, are perhaps the most famous Indian inscriptions that historians have found. They tell us a great deal about the king, the people, and the religions and social lives in India during the reigns. So, what do we need to understand that unlike manuscript, these inscriptions are writings which are carved on hard surfaces like metal, stone, walls, rocks, and pillars. So, what you need to remember that any things which were carved on metals or stone, walls, rocks and pillars, these things are considered to be as inscriptions. You must be visiting various places, you must have seen great walls, and if anything is written or carved, then it is inscription. Okay. Now we'll see the stone edicts of Ashoka uh, are perhaps the most famous Indian inscription that historians have found. Okay, so the the stone edicts of Ashoka are the most famous Indian inscription that historians have found. So from this stone edicts, what can we find? We can find out a great deal of information about the king, the people, and the religions and the social life in India during the reign. So we studied that the edicts of Ashoka, which gave so much information about the people and the religious and social life in India during his reigns. So now, what is this edict? Right, the edict of Ashoka. So edict is an official order or proclamation issued by a person in authority or a king. Right. So this Ashoka, the emperor, had a collection of more than 30 inscriptions on the pillars as well as on the borders and the cave walls. Right. So actually this edicts must include the official orders carved on the walls. Okay. Okay. Now we will move further. Further, we can see the Rosetta Stone. Right. The Rosetta Stone was found out during the repairing a fort at Rosetta in Egypt. In 1799, while the forces of the French Emperor Napoleon were repairing a fort at Rosetta in Egypt, they came across a big flat stone which was about 70 centimeter wide. So Napoleon and his people, when they were uh, repairing a fort at Rosetta in Egypt, okay, they were repairing a fort at Rosetta in Egypt, and they they found out a big flat stone which was about 70 centimeters wide and 110 centimeters long. Okay, now what is the specialty of this stone? The specialty of this stone is that this stone had some inscriptions in three different scripts. Okay, uh, hieroglyphic, demotic, and Greek. So these are the three different scripts: hieroglyphic, demotic, and Greek. Since archaeologists could read Greek inscription, they could not translate the Egyptian script using it. The Rosetta Stone, as this inscription came to be called, was thus the key that unlocked the puzzle of the Egyptian hieroglyphs. Now, uh, as I told that this on the Rosetta Stone had three different scripts. Okay, so hieroglyph, demotic, and Greek. The archaeologists, when they found out, they could only read the Greek inscription. Okay, the Greek script. Then, thus, we can say that this Rosetta Stone came to be called the key that unlocked the puzzle of the Egyptian hieroglyphs. So, in order to understand the other scripts are inscribed on the or carved on uh, the stone, we can conclude that this stone was the key that unlocked the puzzle. Now, next we will see one by one coins and seals. Right. So we know what is a coin. They also have some important stories to tell about the past. Like the coins that we use today, many ancient coins also had pictures and words on both the sides. So, do you have a hobby of collecting coins? Uh, Likewise, the earlier also these coins had uh, ancient coins had pictures and words on both sides. They depicted battle scenes, court scenes, the figures of gods and goddesses, and the faces of kings and queens. The study of coins is known as numismatics. So we can see that various information can be collected from these coins. What are these? The coins were depicted or carved with battle scenes, court scenes, figures of gods and goddesses of, and kings, faces of the kings and queens of the past, right? And the study of coins is known as numismatics. So what you need to remember is the study of coins is known as numismatics, right? And we could with the help of coins we could study about the past also, because these coins were depicted means with they were also carved with some of the scenes like battle scenes, court scenes, the figures of gods and goddesses, and the faces of kings and queens. Now next is seals. Seals, they also tell us much about the past. Many seals with pictures of animals and inscriptions have been discovered from the Indus Valley ruins and other archaeological sites. Some seals from the Indus Valley sites have pictures of animals like the rhinoceros and deers. Nowadays we know that we use seals in order to give any make any document authentic, right? So like that only, maybe earlier also the seals would be used for that purpose only, right? So various the seals were carved with pictures of animals and inscriptions which have been discovered from Indus Valley ruins and other archaeological sites. Some seals from the Indus Valley sites have pictures of animals like the rhinoceros and deer. So this archaeologists, they found out some seals which were discovered from the Indus Valley ruins, and these seals had the pictures of animals like rhinoceros and deer, right? So you can see the pictures of seal down there. Above you can see the picture of coins also, right? You can see the gold coin. So gold coin must be uh, abundantly used during that time. And to the right side you can see a boat is carved to the coins. Okay. Now next we will move to the monuments. Now what is monuments? Archaeologists sometimes find the remains of ancient buildings that have been buried and forgotten. These archaeologists, while finding out many of the things in the archaeological sites, they also found out ancient buildings, means old buildings that have been buried, okay, under the soil and forgotten. No one knows about these ancient buildings. There are, however, many ancient buildings of historical importance and places of worship that have not been buried underground. Such buildings that still remain today are called monuments. Now, some of the ancient buildings are buried and some are not buried. Those which are not buried and which still remains today are called as monuments. Okay, so such buildings which are not buried, which are not forgotten, and which are still remain today, that kind of buildings are called as monuments. So we studied about monument. What is monument? Monument is a building which is not being buried and which is being used. Okay, so here we can see some of the examples of monuments in India. That is Sanchi Stupa, the Taj Mahal, and the Charminar. Okay, so these monuments, they have a great deal about the past, the age in which they were built, and the people who built them. Efforts are made to preserve this historical monuments. If we talk about Taj Mahal, right? So visiting Taj Mahal would give us a great deal of information about about Shah Jahan who built and the people who built them. And you can also see that lots of efforts are being made to preserve these historical monuments. So Till now, we have discovered lots of things like archaeology, the study of inscription, manuscripts, fossils, coins, and monuments. Right. So this all have helped us to find out a great deal about the history and the prehistoric history of India and the world. Now, we will see the history and time. One of the most important thing in the study of history is learning how to recognize dates of significant events. So the key terms used in the history are decade, that is a period of 10 years, a century, that is a period of 100 years, and a millennium, that is a period of 1000 years. Now we will discuss about uh, to locate an event in time. Uh, Dates were used. Okay, traditionally the birth of Christ was used as the point from which years are numbered in history. So in history, the events are numbered from the birth of Christ. So that is labeled as BC, meaning before Christ. And the years later, the birth of Christ was labeled as AD. So that is Anno Domini. It means in the year of the our Lord in Latin. Okay, so BC, before Christ, and AD, Anno Domini, which means the year of our Lord in Latin. Okay. Now this BC and AD, it has been changed with CE and BCE. CE, which means Common Era, and BCE, which stands for before Common Era. Right. So this system is thought to be more neutral. Why, if a question arises in your mind that why this BC and AD has been changed with CE and BCE, it is because of the thought of a neutral way of writing dates, which was acceptable to all the people of the various religion. Okay. Now we will see about circa. It is a Latin word that means around or approximately. Okay, it is used when the exact date of an event is not known, but is thought to be around the stated date. So if if you are not exactly known of some specific date, then we use circa, that is C, which is a Latin word, right? Approximately, which means approximately. So let's take a quick recap. What are the things that we studied? We studied about the study of human past is broadly divided into two parts, prehistory and history. So history means uh, uh, the ones which written accounts is available, and prehistory means no written accounts, right? And then the main sources of prehistory are archaeology and oral history. Archaeologists conduct tests on excavated objects to find out their age. The sources of history are written records, inscription, coins, manuscripts, and monuments. To indicate dates in history, terms like BCE, CE, and circa are used. Hope all the things discussed today are clear in your mind. Thank you.